When winter turned deadly cold, most people today would be toast. But Native Americans, they had tricks that kept them alive on the coldest nights of the year. Their skills weren't just good, they were life-saving. Ready to learn their secrets? It starts with fire. When temperatures plummeted to -40 degrees and the wind howled like an angry spirit, fire wasn't just about comfort, it was the thin line between life and death. For Native Americans facing the harshest winters on the continent, mastering fire wasn't optional. It was essential. Unlike us reaching for a lighter or fumbling with matches, Native Americans created fire from scratch in conditions that would freeze modern camping enthusiasts solid. These weren't your weekend wilderness warriors who panic when their phone battery hits 10%. Using a bow drill, a primitive but genius friction device, they could create embers even when fingers were numb from cold. The bow, usually made from flexible willow, would spin a hardwood drill piece against a softwood base, creating the friction needed for that precious spark. Many tribes kept special fire-making kits protected in waterproof pouches made from animal bladders or intestines. Talk about the original waterproof carrying case. No warranty needed. These contained perfectly dried tinder, materials like cedar bark, cattail fluff, or certain fungi that catch fire with just the tiniest spark. Not all wood burns equally, especially in bitter cold. The knowledge of which trees offered the best heat wasn't just trivia, it was survival intelligence passed down through generations. Hardwoods like oak and maple burn hot and long, but they're difficult to light when wet. Birch, however, was winter gold. Even when soaking wet, the papery outer bark of birch trees contains oils that make it burn hot and fast, perfect for starting fires in damp conditions. Mother Nature's own fire starter kit came with no instruction manual, yet they mastered it anyway. One of the most impressive skills was the ability to transport fire. When traveling in winter, letting your fire die meant starting over, a potentially fatal setback. Native Americans developed clever ways to carry embers for days using materials like hollow plant stems filled with slow-burning punk wood or fungus. These natural fire tubes could keep an ember alive for hours or even days, saving precious energy and time. Many indigenous groups perfected fire-starting techniques using flint and pyrite that could create sparks even in high humidity. By striking these minerals together with precise movements, they could shower sparks onto prepared tinder. With practice, an experienced firekeeper could have flames going in under a minute, faster than most of us can decide what to watch on streaming services. Fire served multiple purposes beyond warmth. It melted snow for drinking water, dried wet clothing that could lead to hypothermia, cooked food to provide energy, hardened wooden tools, and kept predators at bay during the long nights. Some tribes positioned fires at the entrance of their dwellings to heat air as it entered, creating a primitive but effective heating system. Perhaps most importantly, fire provided light during the long winter darkness. Those extra hours of visibility allowed for essential activities like repairing tools, making clothing, and telling stories that preserved cultural knowledge. While we complain about power outages lasting a few hours, they mastered living with nothing but firelight for months at a time. The fire's glow did more than illuminate their surroundings. It illuminated their ingenuity. While we might marvel at their fire-making skills, they would probably be equally amazed that we survive winter without knowing which trees burn best or how to start a flame without modern tools. As critical as fire was, however, it could only protect you if you stayed near it. Step away into the brutal cold, and you need something else to keep you alive. And that's where clothing came in. Ever stepped outside in winter wearing just a hoodie and immediately regretted your life choices? That icy blast hitting your skin is uncomfortable for us. But for Native Americans, clothing mistakes weren't just uncomfortable. They were deadly. While fire kept their shelters warm, proper clothing was their mobile protection system. Native Americans mastered layering techniques long before outdoor gear companies started charging hundreds of dollars for the same concept. The basic principle: trap air between layers because still air is an excellent insulator. Many tribes used 3 distinct layers: a soft inner layer against the skin, a middle insulating layer, and an outer protective shell. Shopping at nature's department store didn't come with return policies, so they had to get it right the first time. The inner layer typically consisted of softer, thinner hides from animals like rabbits or fawns. This layer wickeded moisture away from the body. a critical function since sweat that freezes against your skin can cause hypothermia. Some tribes rubbed these garments with animal brains during tanning, which sounds gross to modern ears, but actually created a butter-soft leather with excellent breathability. For the middle layer, nothing beats the insulating properties of fur. Deer, elk, and bison provided the basic materials, but the warmest garments often incorporated beaver, fox, or wolf fur. Air pockets between fur strands created thermal barriers that modern synthetic materials still struggle to match in extreme cold. One well-made fur garment could contain more than 20,000 individual hairs per square inch, nature's original microfiber. The outer layer needed to block wind and repel moisture. Here, buckskin, typically made from deer or elk, proved its worth. When properly prepared, buckskin achieved water resistance that rivaled modern technical fabrics. The smoking process used to preserve buckskin filled the pores of the leather with water-repellent compounds, creating a natural barrier against snow and sleet. These clothes weren't winning any fashion shows in Paris, but they would definitely win survival contests in Minnesota. Footwear received special attention because frostbitten feet can quickly end mobility, and ultimately, life. Moccasins were often made with multiple layers, including an inner lining of fur worn with the fur side against the foot. Many designs incorporated a separate liner that could be removed, dried by the fire, and rotated with a spare pair, addressing the critical problem of moisture management. Some northern tribes developed knee-high boots with drawstrings at the top that kept snow out while allowing air circulation to prevent sweating. Strategic fur placement showed remarkable understanding of human physiology. Fur ruffs around face openings disrupted airflow patterns that could freeze facial skin. These ruffs created a microclimate of warm air around the face, the same principle used in modern Arctic expedition gear. Mittens were preferred over gloves because keeping fingers together preserved body heat, and some designs included a separate trigger finger for hunting. The most ingenious aspect? Adaptability. Clothing could be adjusted on the fly as conditions changed. Loosening ties during activity prevented overheating and sweating, while cinching everything tight during rest periods maximized heat retention. Multiple ties and toggles around wrists, ankles, waists, and necks created adjustable seals against drafts. One remarkable fact: tests of traditional Arctic clothing have shown they can keep a person warm in temperatures as low as -50 degrees, while maintaining mobility that modern synthetic clothing often sacrifices. With fire keeping their homes warm and clothing protecting them outside, Native Americans still face the challenge of where to sleep when the ground itself became a frozen deathbed. Now imagine having to sleep outside tonight in -30-degree weather with no modern tent. Sounds impossible, right? Yet Native Americans not only survived such conditions, they mastered them through ingenious shelter designs that turned deadly environments into protective havens. Earth lodges and pit houses turned the ground itself into a natural heater. By digging several feet into the soil, these structures took advantage of the Earth's consistent temperature, which hovers around 50 degrees Fahrenheit below the frost line regardless of air temperature. A pit house essentially positioned its occupants below the most extreme cold while using the Earth's thermal mass as a heat battery. The layout of these earthen dwellings followed specific patterns based on seasonal needs. Many were circular, minimizing the surface area exposed to cold and eliminating corners where heat could escape. The eastern orientation of entrances in many tribal dwellings wasn't merely symbolic. It allowed the rising sun to warm the entrance while avoiding the prevailing northwestern winter winds. One particularly clever feature found in some northern dwellings was the cold trap entrance passage. These descending entrances force cold air, which is heavier than warm air, to sink into a designated area before it could infiltrate the main living space. When someone entered or exited, the cold air stayed in this lower section rather than flowing throughout the entire dwelling. These were the original smart homes, just without the annoying voice assistant telling you the temperature. The double wall technique represented another stroke of engineering brilliance. Some dwellings featured an inner wall of tightly stretched hides several inches away from the outer structural wall. This created a dead air space that functioned exactly like modern double-pane windows, dramatically reducing heat loss through conduction. Roofing materials were selected and layered specifically for winter performance. Birch bark, widely used as a covering material, naturally sheds water and resists rot. Layers of grass or evergreen boughs beneath the bark created additional insulating air pockets. In regions with heavy snow, roof designs intentionally accumulated snow cover for added insulation, turning what might seem like a structural threat into a thermal advantage. The durability of these traditional designs speaks to their effectiveness. Excavations of ancient pit houses dating back thousands of years show remarkably consistent design principles, suggesting that once these cold weather adaptations were developed, they proved so effective that they remained largely unchanged for millennia. With shelter ensuring survival through the night, the next challenge was maintaining the energy needed to function in such demanding conditions. Today, many people run away from fat in their diets, but for Native Americans facing brutal winters, fat wasn't the enemy. It was the hero of their survival story. While modern nutritionists debate optimal macronutrient ratios, indigenous people intuitively understood what science now confirms. In extreme cold, fat equals life. Why did fat reign supreme in winter? The answer lies in basic thermodynamics. Fat provides 9 calories per gram, more than double the energy of proteins or carbohydrates. This dense energy source burns slowly in the body, generating consistent heat over longer periods. Studies of traditional Arctic diets reveal winter fat consumption that would make a cardiologist faint, sometimes reaching 70% of total calories. Their winter menu wouldn't win any awards from modern health magazines, but it kept hearts beating when nothing else would. The winter hunting strategy specifically targeted fat-rich animals. Beaver, with their thick layers of insulating fat, became a prized winter game. A single beaver could provide several pounds of fat, enough to sustain a person for many days. Bears, hunted in late fall before hibernation when their fat stores peaked, provided both meat and rendered fat that could last months when properly stored. Storage techniques for preserving this precious resource showed remarkable ingenuity. Without refrigeration, keeping food from spoiling presented a massive challenge. Many tribes dug deep storage pits below the frost line where temperatures remained consistently cold but not freezing. Others utilized frozen lakes and streams as natural freezers, submerging wrapped meat packages beneath the ice where temperatures remained stable. Rendered fat from larger animals underwent processing to extend its shelf life. By carefully heating animal fat to remove water content and straining it to remove impurities, the resulting product, similar to modern lard or tallow, could remain stable for months or even years without spoiling. Some groups added berries containing natural preservatives to further extend storage time. The ultimate winter survival food merged protein and fat into a single, long-lasting superfood: pemmican. This concentrated mixture combined dried, pounded meat with melted fat and sometimes dried berries. The fat content sealed away oxygen from the meat, preventing spoilage while providing essential calories. A single pound of well-made pemmican contained more than 3,000 calories and could sustain hard physical activity in extreme cold. Most remarkably, properly prepared pemmican could last for years without refrigeration. This was fast food before fast food existed, except it actually kept you alive instead of doing the opposite. Hydration during winter presented its own challenges. Melting snow or ice requires substantial energy, both to physically obtain it and to heat it. Many groups developed techniques for capturing liquid water from beneath ice rather than expending precious calories melting snow. Hot beverages made from conifer needles not only provided hydration, but also delivered vitamin C, preventing scurvy during months when fresh plants were unavailable. The winter diet also followed strategic timing. Many indigenous groups practiced intentional feasting in early morning and evening, with the morning meal providing energy for the day's activities and the evening meal generating heat through digestion during the coldest hours of night. This pattern maximized the thermogenic effect of food, the production of heat through digestion. Perhaps most impressive was the efficient use of every available calorie. Research suggests some northern tribes survived brutal winters on less than 2,000 calories per day, far less than modern calculations would predict necessary in such conditions. This metabolic efficiency came through a combination of physiological adaptation and careful energy management. With proper nutrition providing internal warmth, the final challenge of winter survival extended beyond what they put in their bodies. Staying warm wasn't just about fuel, it was about action. If you found yourself freezing in the wilderness, would you sit still or keep moving? This wasn't a theoretical question for Native Americans, it was daily survival. The counterintuitive truth: when temperatures drop dangerously low, movement becomes essential for survival, not optional. Winter hunting represented both necessity and danger. Venturing out meant risking exposure, but staying inactive meant certain starvation. The hunting techniques developed for deep snow and bitter cold displayed a level of innovation that modern winter sportsmen still rely on today. Tracking animals in winter presented unique challenges. A fresh dusting of snow might seem ideal for spotting tracks, but in reality, deep powder often obscured signs that would be obvious in other seasons. Many tribes developed tracking methods that looked beyond simple footprints. Broken branches at deer height, bark rubbed from trees, or subtle changes in snow compression revealed animal presence when obvious tracks disappeared. Their tracking skills made modern GPS look like a child's toy with dead batteries. The timing of winter hunts followed strategic patterns based on animal behavior and weather conditions. Dawn and dusk, when many prey animals are most active, aligned with slightly warmer daily temperatures, creating optimal hunting windows. Hunting parties monitored weather patterns, knowing that animals often feed heavily before incoming storms. A skilled hunter could read subtle changes in animal behavior that signaled weather shifts days before they occurred. No winter survival technology proved more revolutionary than the snowshoe. These ingenious devices distributed weight across a larger surface area, preventing the wearer from sinking into deep snow. Various tribes developed regional designs specifically adapted to local snow conditions: wider, rounder shapes for powdery snow, and narrower, more elongated designs for wetter, heavier snow. Tests of traditional snowshoe designs have shown they reduce energy expenditure by up to 60% compared to trudging through deep snow without them. Movement itself generated crucial body heat. Many indigenous cold weather clothing systems were designed specifically to manage sweat during activity while retaining heat during rest periods. When properly dressed, a person generating heat through movement could maintain body temperature even in negative 20-degree weather. The principle of never standing still extended to camp life as well. Essential tasks were structured to require regular movement. Collecting firewood, checking traps, and breaking ice for water created a steady rhythm of activity that maintained circulation and generated warmth throughout the day. Even children's games often incorporated physical activity that built cold weather endurance while teaching essential skills. Winter fishing demonstrated particularly impressive ingenuity. Cutting holes through ice that could be several feet thick required specialized tools and techniques. Many groups used heated stones to melt initial holes, then carved through the remaining ice with bone or antler tools. Some tribes built small shelters directly over ice holes, creating protected fishing stations where a person could remain for hours without exposure to wind. Their ice fishing setups were like the original ice shanties, minus the questionable music and suspicious thermoses. Knowledge of underwater geography proved essential for winter fishing success. Fish congregate in specific areas during winter, deeper pools with less ice cover and more available oxygen. Experienced fishers memorized these locations during warmer months, enabling them to target productive spots even when the landscape was transformed by snow and ice. Some fishing techniques involved setting intricate weir systems beneath the ice that could trap fish for days without requiring constant attention. Perhaps most impressive was the ability to navigate vast distances in winter conditions. Without visible landmarks, wayfinding relied on subtle cues, prevailing wind patterns that created consistent snowdrifts, star positions, and even the feel of snow underfoot. Some tribes could travel dozens of miles in harsh conditions using carefully maintained trails and emergency shelter locations. All these physical activities served another critical purpose beyond providing food. They nurtured the human spirit during the harshest season. But winter survival wasn't just a physical challenge. The psychological approach to winter, the mindset of survival, often determined who lived and who perished when temperatures plummeted. At the heart of this winter survival mindset stood community. The lone wolf stereotype of wilderness survival fails dramatically when tested against harsh reality. Native American winter camps operated as interdependent units where tasks were distributed according to ability and resources shared according to need. This wasn't just kindness, it was a practical survival strategy. Studies of traditional winter settlements reveal carefully organized living arrangements that maximized resource sharing while minimizing exposure. Being antisocial in winter wasn't just rude, it was practically a death wish. Knowledge transfer within these winter communities followed specific patterns designed to ensure critical information survived. Winter evenings around fires became universities of survival lore, with each generation absorbing techniques, location knowledge, and emergency protocols through stories and direct instruction. Some tribes develop memory systems capable of preserving thousands of specific details about local environments, effectively creating living survival manuals more accurate than any written text. Oral traditions that might seem purely entertaining actually contained embedded survival codes. Many winter stories specifically included landmark descriptions, weather warning signs, or emergency techniques woven into their narratives. A seemingly simple tale about a fox might contain precise information about where to find certain routes during food shortages or how to recognize dangerous ice conditions. Winter ceremonies and spiritual practices played a dual role, reinforcing communal bonds while providing psychological tools for enduring hardship. Many tribes maintained specific winter rituals that divided the coldest months into manageable segments, creating psychological milestones that made the season feel less endless. These practices offered more than comfort. They provided essential structure during a time when natural daylight diminished and normal activity patterns changed dramatically. The emotional approach to winter itself revealed remarkable wisdom. Rather than viewing the season as something to endure or fight against, many Native American cultures approached winter as a necessary and valuable part of the natural cycle. This perspective shift, seeing winter as essential rather than adversarial, reduced the psychological burden of the season. Contemporary research on seasonal affective disorder suggests that cultural framing of winter significantly impacts mental health during dark months. Their winter attitude wasn't just positive thinking, it was mental armor against the cold. Humor served as a critical survival tool in its own right. Winter stories frequently incorporated jokes and humorous elements specifically designed to combat the psychological effects of confinement and darkness. Many elders considered laughter as essential to winter survival as warm clothing. The ability to find humor in hardship prevented the depression and hopelessness that could lead to fatal mistakes or surrendering to conditions. Problem solving under winter conditions required a specific cognitive approach that balanced conservation of resources with decisive action. Native American winter survival emphasized advanced planning while maintaining flexibility, a combination that modern emergency responders still recognize as optimal for crisis situations. Training in this cognitive style began in childhood through games and challenges specifically designed to build winter problem-solving skills. Perhaps most importantly, tribal winter mindsets incorporated a realistic acceptance of hardship without surrendering to despair. The psychological balance of acknowledging difficulty while maintaining confidence proved more effective than either blind optimism or fatalistic pessimism. This middle path, clear-eyed realism coupled with earned confidence, represents the essence of the survival mindset that carried generations through countless cold nights. This holistic approach to winter survival, integrating physical preparation with psychological resilience and communal support, demonstrates that surviving the coldest night was never about brute force or simple endurance. It was a sophisticated system built on knowledge, preparation, and a relationship with winter itself that modern cold weather adventurers are still learning to appreciate.